Imagine this. It's a cold December night, and you're on a long-haul flight from New York to Seoul. The clock strikes 1 a.m. as the plane taxis onto the runway, ready for takeoff. The hum of engines fills the cabin, and over 250 passengers settle in for the 14-hour journey ahead. Suddenly, a piercing shout erupts from the luxurious first-class cabin. Confusion spreads as the plane, moments away from takeoff, is abruptly ordered to turn back to the gate. Why? Over a bag of macadamia nuts. Yes, you heard that right. A small bag of nuts derailed an entire flight and sparked a scandal that would grip South Korea and shock the world. Today, we dive into the infamous nut rage incident, a story of privilege, power, and a fight for justice that went far beyond the confines of one plane. Cho Hyun-ah, also known as Heather Cho, was born into one of South Korea's most powerful families. As the eldest daughter of Cho Hyun-ah, chairman of the Hanjin Group, which owns Korean Air, she grew up in a world of unimaginable privilege. The Cho family had built an empire spanning aviation, logistics, and maritime industries, making them a cornerstone of South Korea's chaebol elite. These conglomerates, often run as family dynasties, wield immense influence over the country's economy and politics. From a young age, Cho was groomed to follow in her father's footsteps. After completing her education at prestigious institutions like the University of Southern California and Cornell University, she joined Korean Air and quickly rose through the ranks. Her resume was impeccable, highlighting her role as a vice president responsible for cabin service. On paper, Cho seemed like the epitome of a modern, successful businesswoman. But her story would soon reveal the darker side of privilege and power. The Cho family, despite their wealth and status, was no stranger to controversy. Over the years, they were involved in numerous scandals, ranging from smuggling luxury goods to allegations of employee abuse. For many South Koreans, the family symbolized the arrogance and entitlement of the chaebol class. Cho Hyun-ah's infamous nut rage incident became the most notorious example of this behavior, turning her from a symbol of corporate success into a cautionary tale about unchecked privilege. The chaos began innocently enough. On December 5, 2014, a Korean Air flight was preparing for takeoff from New York's JFK Airport to Seoul. Sitting in the first-class cabin was Cho Hyun-ah, vice president of Korean Air and the eldest daughter of the airline's chairman. The cabin crew served her a bag of macadamia nuts, as per first-class protocol. But there was one problem. The nuts were presented in their original packaging instead of on a porcelain plate. What most passengers might consider a minor oversight ignited a storm of fury from Cho, who perceived the service as an unacceptable breach of professionalism. Fuming, Cho called over the flight attendant responsible, Kim Do-hee, and berated her in front of other passengers. As the young flight attendant tried to explain that serving nuts in a bag was standard procedure, Cho's anger only escalated. She demanded to see the service manual, forcing Kim to sift through its pages while being chastised for her incompetence. Cho declared that she, as vice president, knew the airline's policies better than anyone and claimed that Kim's actions were an embarrassment to Korean Air's reputation. When the chief steward, Park Chang-jin, attempted to intervene and defuse the situation, Cho turned her rage toward him. She accused him of failing to manage his team properly and demanded that he personally bring her the service manual. Despite his calm demeanor and attempts to appease her, Cho wasn't satisfied. Instead, she demanded that Park leave the plane immediately, a shocking request, given that the aircraft was already taxiing on the runway. The cabin crew and captain faced an impossible situation. Under pressure from Cho, the captain made the extraordinary decision to turn the plane back to the gate, delaying the flight by approximately 20 minutes. Passengers were left bewildered as they watched the chief steward disembark, unsure of the real reason behind the delay. For Cho, the matter seemed settled. The plane eventually took off without further incident, and she remained in her seat, unbothered by the chaos she had caused. However, for the cabin crew and the passengers, the incident left an indelible mark. What should have been a routine flight turned into a power play that exposed the extent to which Cho wielded her authority. The ordeal didn't end there. When the flight landed in Seoul, the news of the incident began to leak. It painted a picture of a powerful heiress abusing her position to humiliate her employees over something as trivial as a bag of nuts. The story soon became front-page news, earning the nickname Nut Rage. The public was outraged, viewing Cho's actions as a stark example of chaebol arrogance and entitlement. This meltdown in the skies was more than a mere tantrum. It was a display of unchecked privilege that would have lasting repercussions for everyone involved. For Cho, it was the beginning of a public relations disaster. For the cabin crew, it marked the start of a grueling fight for justice. And for South Korea, it sparked a national reckoning with the toxic culture of power and privilege entrenched within its corporate elite. The Nut Rage incident might have remained a footnote in Korean Air's internal operations, if not for the actions of the chief steward, Park Chang-jin. Upon returning to South Korea, Park broke his silence, sharing the humiliating details of what had transpired aboard the flight. His account sent shockwaves through the nation. Cho Hyun-ah's actions were no longer just an isolated tantrum, but a symbol of the unchecked power and entitlement of South Korea's chaebol elite. The public's response was swift and unforgiving. Outrage poured in from all corners of society, with many pointing to the incident as an egregious example of gapjil, a term describing the arrogant and abusive behavior of those in power. The story gained momentum internationally, further amplifying the embarrassment for Korean Air. Public figures and media outlets alike criticized Cho's behavior, framing it as a symptom of a deeper problem: the impunity enjoyed by the rich and powerful in South Korea. Under mounting pressure, South Korean authorities launched an investigation into the incident. What they uncovered only fueled the public's anger. Korean Air executives had attempted to cover up the scandal, going so far as to order employees to delete records and destroy evidence related to the flight. Meanwhile, Cho initially denied any wrongdoing, portraying herself as the victim of a smear campaign. However, as eyewitnesses, including passengers and other crew members, came forward to corroborate Park's account, Cho's defenses crumbled. The backlash extended beyond Cho herself, as Korean Air faced intense scrutiny for its handling of the situation. Reports surfaced that the airline had tried to silence witnesses by offering them gifts, including model airplanes and calendars, in exchange for their cooperation. This blatant attempt to buy silence only deepened the public's mistrust. Calls for accountability grew louder, with many demanding harsher punishments for those involved. For Park, the ordeal was far from over. He faced retaliation within the company, including attempts to force him to write an apology letter accepting blame for the incident. When he refused, Korean Air terminated his employment. However, Park's courage in speaking out resonated with the public, transforming him into a symbol of resistance against corporate abuse. Ultimately, Cho Hyun-ah was arrested and charged with violations of aviation law and abuse of power. While she was sentenced to 1 year in prison, her punishment was later reduced, and she served only 5 months. This leniency reignited debates about South Korea's judicial system and its tendency to favor the wealthy and influential. The aftermath of the Nut Rage scandal revealed more than just a spoiled heiress's tantrum. It exposed the deep-rooted inequalities in South Korean society and sparked a national conversation about the need for accountability, fairness, and the limits of privilege. For many, it was a reminder that even those in the highest positions of power are not above the law, at least not when the public refuses to stay silent. The Nut Rage scandal reached its boiling point as South Korean authorities pursued legal action against Cho Hyun-ah. What began as a bizarre outburst on an international flight evolved into a high-profile trial that gripped the nation. Facing charges of violating aviation laws, obstructing a flight, and abusing her position of power, Cho's day in court became a pivotal moment in South Korea's reckoning with the unchecked privilege of its chaebol elite. Public anticipation for justice was immense. Many saw this case as a rare opportunity to hold a powerful figure accountable. During the trial, details of the incident painted an unflattering picture of Cho as a domineering executive whose sense of entitlement knew no bounds. Witnesses, including crew members and passengers, testified to the humiliation and chaos she caused that night. Their accounts were supported by evidence, including attempts by Korean Air executives to tamper with records and silence those involved. In 2015, the court sentenced Cho to 1 year in prison, stating that her actions had damaged the dignity of flight attendants and undermined aviation safety. Initially, the verdict was celebrated as a landmark decision, proof that even the wealthy and influential could face consequences for their actions. However, this victory for justice was short-lived. Just 5 months later, Cho's sentence was suspended and she was released early. For many South Koreans, her early release reinforced the belief that the powerful are never truly held accountable. The scandal also had far-reaching consequences for Korean Air. Public trust in the airline plummeted, and the company faced widespread criticism for its attempts to shield Cho and suppress the truth. Even Cho's father, Cho Hyun-ah, was forced to publicly apologize for his daughter's actions. Despite these gestures, the damage to the family's reputation and the airline's image was severe. Meanwhile, Park Chang-jin, the whistleblower and chief steward who endured Cho's abuse, continued to fight for justice. After being fired from Korean Air, he struggled to find work due to the immense influence of the Cho family and their allies. His story became a rallying cry for ordinary workers facing mistreatment by powerful employers. Park's courage in standing up to the chaebol culture of entitlement resonated with a public eager for change. The nut rage scandal left a complex legacy. On one hand, it sparked a national conversation about the need to reform South Korea's chaebol system and curtail the excesses of its elites. On the other hand, it highlighted the limitations of a justice system that still seemed to favor the wealthy. For Cho Hyun-ah, the incident marked the downfall of her corporate career. But for the people of South Korea, it was a symbol of the ongoing struggle for fairness and accountability in the face of entrenched privilege. Was justice truly served? For many, the answer remains unclear. Cho faced public humiliation and temporary imprisonment, but her punishment felt lenient compared to the harm caused. The scandal, however, ensured that her actions, and the larger culture of impunity they represented, would not be easily forgotten. The nut rage scandal isn't just a story about a delayed flight. It's a cautionary tale about entitlement, power, and the human cost of unchecked privilege. Cho's meltdown may have started over a bag of nuts, but it ended up exposing deep flaws in South Korea's social hierarchy. For the passengers on that flight, the delay was temporary. But for a nation, the ripple effects of that night are still being felt today. What do you think? Was justice served? Or was this just another example of the powerful escaping accountability? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more real-life scandals and mysteries. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.